Hey there, dear listener. I'm the narrator for tonight, and I'm here to guide you through a story that won't leave your mind so easily. I know you use these videos to fall asleep more easily, so before you close your eyes, hit that like button and subscribe. And by the way, where are you watching from and what time is it over there? Get comfortable, breathe deeply, because what comes next is not for the faint of heart. I remember that cold evening gust that hit me the moment I stepped under the uneven cobblestone pavement. The moon was hiding behind thick clouds, and the shadows fell in strange, broken patterns across the deserted streets. My breath turned into mist, and the city felt like it had come to a halt, as if it was holding its breath. Unusually quiet, unnaturally quiet. I tried to pull myself together, just one more guided tour through the forgotten corners of the old quarter, one more night to share my stories. But something was different. That night, the silence wasn't ordinary. It had weight, as if something was waiting. I had 5 people with me. They were excited, but unsure. In their eyes, I saw that moment of recognition, the moment they realized they were standing with the infamous horror tour guide, the one who speaks of ghosts, forgotten legends, and things best left unspoken. As we walked, I spoke. The usual tales: haunted buildings, unexplained deaths, shadows that appear and vanish. The audience usually reacts quickly, goosebumps, nervous smiles. But this time, it was my skin that prickled first. Somewhere between 2 stories, in a dimly lit alley, I caught something out of the corner of my eye, a silhouette, short and strange, gliding across the asphalt, too smoothly, as if it was floating. I thought it was a reflection, a trick of the light, but it felt real, too real. A question from the group interrupted me, and when I looked back, it was gone, or at least smart enough to hide. We moved on. I kept talking, but my words felt empty, hollower than before. The streetlights flickered, shadows stretched too far. I felt my heart racing, not from excitement, but from something closer to panic. I didn't know what it was, but I knew something was following us. His skin was almost translucent, and his eyes sunken into dark hollows. He didn't move. He just stared at me. His expression was blank, but beneath it there was a quiet threat. My throat went dry, my skin crawled, and for a moment I thought my heart had stopped. I blinked, and in that instant the figure vanished. All that remained was a dark opening in the wall, filled with melted wax and scraps of old fabric that looked like they belonged to the previous century. My legs gave out. I had to lean on the bed frame, trying to catch my breath like I had just run a marathon. Fear surged through my veins, every hair on my body standing on end. My thoughts were scattered. I couldn't tell if I had hallucinated or if something impossible had just made contact with me. I stared into that black void longer, but nothing made sense. The smell of stale air and the suffocating anxiety made me feel claustrophobic. No footprints, no signs, just dust and mold. My mind couldn't come to terms with what I had seen. I couldn't decide whether it had all been an illusion or if something truly impossible had just appeared before my eyes. In the end, I looked again into the dark hollow. The air felt heavier, the silence thick like lead. And when I tried to look away, I heard it, a faint whisper. It was barely audible, but the words, if there were any, felt like a warning, something foreign and unfamiliar. My heart was pounding, and my hands were shaking. In that moment, I shut the panel, After that, I didn't step foot into the bedroom. I spent the day pacing through the living room, checking every window and door. That's when I remembered what the caretaker had said. The chalet was old, full of personal character. His words were cold, but he quickly changed the subject when I mentioned unexplainable things. After what I had experienced, I knew he hadn't told me everything. Still, I didn't believe I'd ever get a real explanation. As day turned to night, I forced myself to cook dinner in the old kitchen. The overhead light was dim and yellowish, but just enough for safe cooking. Every clink of utensils sent jolts through my stomach. It felt like the walls were alive, waiting. I still sensed the figure's presence, and every spoonful I brought to my mouth grew heavier. My appetite vanished before I got through half the plate. As darkness fell, I considered sleeping in the living room, but in the end I forced myself to return to the bedroom, even though it felt pointless. Each step up the stairs echoed, and when I entered the room, it was exactly as I had left it, only more terrifying. The bed was still out of place, even though I hadn't touched anything. I made myself push it back, swallowing the lump in my throat. And then, when I turned off the light, the silence became unbearable. I felt every ounce of tension in my body. The first hour was quiet, aside from my heavy breathing, but then I heard something, a slow scraping sound like nails on wood. My heart began to pound, and a pressure built in my chest. It was too deliberate, too intentional to be chance. My legs felt like rubber, and each following noise only made the fear worse. In the end, I couldn't hold my breath any longer. My body was pinned to the mattress, every muscle frozen with the instinct to flee, but I didn't move. There was nowhere to go in the middle of the night, on a mountain top. At some point, I couldn't bear my own fear any longer. I threw off the covers, grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand, and ripped open the panel, determined to confront whatever lay behind it. The beam of light cut through the dusty, suffocating air, revealing the same space as before, empty, forgotten, with no trace of an uninvited guest. Still, the scent of mold and old wax grew stronger, surrounding me in increasingly thick and oppressive air. My chest tightened, as if something was pressing against my lungs, making each breath a struggle. I fought the urge to vomit from the stench. I aimed the flashlight deeper, but saw nothing. Yet the presence was so clear, it locked my neck in place. With trembling hands, I shut the panel again and stumbled into the hallway. My sweaty hoodie clung to my back. My breathing was erratic. A wave of dizziness overtook me, forcing me to lean against the wall. In that moment, I began to question my sanity. How could I be sure of anything I had seen? Maybe loneliness and stress had created a vivid hallucination, but the physical details were too clear, too real. The face of that figure was carved into my mind, every contour, every hollow, clear as daylight. Not even the worst nightmares could conjure up something so vivid. For days I wandered in a fog of paranoia. I jumped at every creak, every whisper of wind brushing the windows. My footsteps on the floorboards sounded foreign, as if I had no right to be there. The caretaker came by again, checking in with a routine. "Is everything all right?" I told him about the strange noises, but didn't mention the man behind the panel. He simply shrugged again, saying that old chalets often have their secrets. I asked if he'd ever found hidden compartments or discovered anything about past residents. For a moment, he paused, visibly uncomfortable, then responded vaguely about some rumors and whispered stories. I sensed his unease ran deeper, but I couldn't get anything more out of him. He left, casting a glance over his shoulder as if eager to get away from the place. That same afternoon, I searched the rest of the chalet, hoping to find an old journal or document that might explain the presence I'd witnessed. In the attic, I found a few decayed newspapers, some outdated letters, but nothing useful. The only consistent pattern was the smell of extinguished candles, that same scent I had begun to associate with whatever was hiding behind the walls. Even the letters, older than I could precisely determine, carried the same smell. The nights turned into waking nightmares. Sleep became rare, and every time I managed to drift off, I would wake to the sound of nails scratching wood. I'd lie there, frozen, my heart about to burst, every breath heavier than the last. One night, I felt movement in the dark, the sound of fabric brushing across the bed frame. My heart pounded so hard I was sure it would explode from my chest. I shut my eyes, too terrified to see what stood next to my bed. At the edge of hearing, I caught a voice soft, almost sympathetic, but the words were indecipherable. Tears streamed down my face, and the fear was so intense I couldn't breathe. Only when it stopped did I gather the courage to open my eyes. Each day I edged closer to leaving. My nerves were frayed, and my reflection in the mirror looked drained, with dark shadows beneath my eyes that rivaled what I'd seen. Still, something kept me there, a stubborn urge to prove to myself I wasn't going insane, that I could solve the mystery haunting these walls. Sometimes I wondered if the man was a restless spirit or just a manifestation of my mind slowly unraveling under pressure. The caretaker's indifferent expressions suggested he knew far more than he'd let on, or perhaps he simply refused to believe what was obvious. The breaking point came one especially cold night when the wind howled outside and the old shutters slammed against the walls as if they'd rip free at any moment. I sat in the living room with only one light on, trying to read a book and distract my thoughts. The lines blurred, and my mind kept drifting back to the presence behind the walls. Without warning, the lamp flickered, and the air turned icy. Goosebumps covered my arms. I can't prove that the man ever existed, nor that what I saw, that cursed candle flame, was real. Sometimes I doubt myself, thinking that I succumbed to madness caused by isolation. At other times, the memory is so vivid that I can almost see his hollow eyes again. I tried explaining my experience to a few people, always indirectly, testing their reactions. But no one offered a reasonable explanation that would satisfy me. No one believes in the supernatural, so I carry that fearful memory alone. Even now, the memory of that hidden panel and the empty, sunken gaze follows me wherever I go. If I happen to catch a glimpse of my reflection in a dark window, sometimes I get scared, thinking I'll see him behind me or that my own face will carry the same empty hollows. And in those moments, I realize that, no matter how much I run, a part of me stayed in that chalet, the part that shudders in silence, reassuring itself that some hidden presence is still lurking behind the walls, waiting to be discovered and acknowledged. I physically escaped, but that unsettling feeling remained like a scar on my soul. The silence of the chalet was never comforting. It was a merciless emptiness that revealed layers of horror I wish to forget. Every breath I take still carries the smell of that extinguished candle, an unrelenting reminder that not all silences are peaceful and that some secrets are better left buried. Then, in the silence, I heard a faint series of taps, slow, deliberate. It was the same pattern I recognized from the scratches, but now it echoed through the entire house. My heart was clenched with fear, and each breath came in short, strained gulps. With trembling hands, I stood and followed the sound, tracing it to the stairs. As I climbed, the temperature dropped and my vision blurred as if I were teetering on the edge of unconsciousness. When I reached the bedroom door, it opened on its own. Inside, the darkness was alive, almost tangible, and the energy in the air pushed me to turn back. Still, I forced myself to enter, driven by a mix of terror and resolve. I cannot prove that the man ever existed, nor that what I saw, that cursed candle flame, was real. Sometimes I doubt myself, thinking I've succumbed to madness caused by isolation. At other times, the memory is so vivid that I can almost see his hollow eyes again. I tried to explain my experience to a few people, always indirectly, testing their reactions, but no one offered a reasonable explanation that would satisfy me. No one believes in the supernatural, so I carry this terrifying memory alone. Even now, the memory of that hidden panel and the empty, sunken gaze follows me wherever I go. If I catch a glimpse of my reflection in a dark window, I sometimes get scared, thinking I'll see him behind me, or that my own face will bear those same empty hollows. And in those moments, I realize that no matter how much I run, part of me was left in that chalet, the part that trembles in silence, ensuring that some hidden presence still lurks behind the walls, waiting to be uncovered and acknowledged. I physically escaped, but that unsettling feeling remains, like a scar on my soul. The silence of the chalet was never comforting. It was a merciless void that revealed layers of horror I wish I could forget. Every breath I take still carries the scent of that extinguished candle, an unrelenting reminder that not all silences are peaceful and some secrets are better left buried. I woke in the middle of the night, my heart already pounding as if some nameless fear had stirred me. The darkness felt thicker than usual, a heavy blanket seeping into my breath. A faint sliver of moonlight pierced the gap in the curtains, illuminating the dust dancing in the thick, stifling air. Something was wrong. My pulse throbbed in my temples, and a wave of nausea twisted in my stomach. I tried to listen, but the silence was suffocating, almost as though it was being held in place, until a scream tore through it. Sharp, so sharp it sent needles down my arms. I leapt out of bed, nearly tripping over the shoes I had clumsily left by the door. The scream echoed down the hallway, then suddenly stopped. I gripped the doorknob, not wanting to open it, but at the same time compelled to see what was happening. With trembling fingers, I turned the handle and stumbled into the hallway. The ceiling light was off, leaving the space in half-darkness, interrupted only by the dim light of the emergency lamp near the stairs. At first, I saw nothing, just the long hallway leading to other bedrooms. The silence returned, but now it was alive, like a held breath, ready to explode. The doors to my roommates' rooms were closed. I stood there, barefoot on the cold wooden floor, bracing for another scream, my muscles tensed, waiting, and the terrible sound still echoed in my ears. Moments passed, and time stretched into a tension that gripped my neck. Finally, one door opened, just enough for a bloodshot eye to appear. The voice was low and strained, whispering that it had heard a deep voice, almost inhuman. I woke up in the middle of the night, my heart already pounding as if some nameless fear had awakened me. The darkness felt thicker than usual, a heavy blanket creeping into my breath. A faint ray of moonlight pierced the gap in the curtains, illuminating the dust dancing in the thick, stifling air. Something was wrong. My pulse thudded in my temples, and a wave of nausea curled in my stomach. I tried to listen, but the silence was suffocating, almost as if it were being held in place, until it was ripped apart by a scream, sharp, so sharp that needles ran down my arms. I jumped out of bed, nearly stumbling over the shoes I had left clumsily by the door. The scream echoed down the hall, then suddenly fell silent. I gripped the doorknob, not wanting to open it, yet compelled to see what was happening. With trembling fingers, I turned the knob and staggered into the hallway. The ceiling light was off, leaving the space in dimness, only interrupted by the faint light of the emergency lamp by the stairs. At first I saw nothing, just a long hallway leading to the other bedrooms. The silence returned, but now it was alive, like a held breath, ready to explode. My roommate's doors were shut. I stood there, barefoot on the cold wooden floor, bracing for another scream. My muscles tensed, waiting, and in my ears the terrifying sound still echoed. Moments passed, and time stretched into a tension that gripped my throat. Finally, one door opened, just enough for a bloodshot eye to appear. The voice was low and tight, whispering that it had heard a deep voice, almost inhuman. My roommate, with an uncertain voice, insisted that he had heard a sharp, almost metallic scream, while the third roommate mumbled something behind the locked doors, saying that he had heard more voices overlapping. No one wanted to open their doors fully, as if the hallway had now become forbidden territory, tainted by those strange resonances. From that moment on, the house began to change. At first, it was only occasional screams, piercing the silence at odd hours, sometimes before dawn, sometimes just after midnight. Each of us became an unwilling guardian of our own fears, rarely speaking about these events. In the shared kitchen, someone would mention being awakened by the sound, trembling, while others would rub their hands as if trying to shake off the remaining cold. But the more it happened, the more we realized that we hadn't even heard the same sound. My personal experience was a sharp, high-pitched scream, while my neighbor across the hall claimed he heard something rough and animalistic. Our nights became a patchwork of uncertain illusions, each of us convinced of our version of terror, even though we all shared the same walls. Soon the screams started to overlap, echoes coming from different empty rooms as if multiple creatures were screaming in unison. We would all rush to check, but found nothing, no sign to explain who or what was making those sounds. Still, the sudden bursts of crying never ceased to pound my heart in my chest. My mouth would dry out, and sweat would drip down my forehead, sliding down my temples. The realization that these sounds came from empty rooms was more terrifying than if we had found an actual person in distress. At least that would have given us something tangible to face. And then came the night when I saw that strange shadow. It was late, after 2 a.m., when I lay in bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. My eyes were heavy, and the dull headache pulsed in them. I was about to get up for a glass of water when I heard something hit the wall outside. My heart jumped. I gathered all the courage I had and crept up to the door, opening it just a little. That's when I noticed movement in the hallway. A dark shadow, a flash crossing from one door to the stairs. It moved quickly and had an oddly angular shape, without the smooth lines of a human body. I took a deep breath, my breath heavy. The shadow stopped. For a moment it seemed to flicker in the faint light of the hallway. My eyes strained to focus, while a chill swept over me. It seemed like the figure suddenly turned its head, as if it had noticed my presence, or maybe mocking my attempt to stay hidden. And then, as quickly as it had come, it rushed toward the kitchen. I stepped outside, my legs trembling, and slowly followed it. Each step echoed hollowly on the floors. The whole house felt tense, the air charged. Even the usual sounds of the fridge or traffic seemed quieter, as if they were submerged in some elusive energy. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped. No one had turned on the light, and in the faint reflection of the outside light through the window, I saw empty tables and countertops. Yet the space didn't feel abandoned. It had the sense that something was standing before me, almost invisible, but present. Goosebumps covered my hands, and every strand of hair at the back of my neck stood up. I heard what seemed like warm breath passing by my face, but the air was still. A wave of nausea hit my stomach, but I couldn't say a word. My vocal cords were stiff, as if fear had paralyzed them. I slowly backed away, trying not to make any sudden movements, and with each passing moment, I swore that the presence was there, something invisible but tangible, radiating a mixture of hostility and curiosity. When I crossed the threshold back into the hallway, I felt a strong surge of adrenaline, as if my body had realized I was not safe. I quickly went to my room and locked the door, pressing my back against it. As the days passed, the sounds, creaks, and whispers became nothing more than background noise in my life. Yet deep inside, I always felt that something still lingered in the depths of those walls, that evil, the sorrow beneath every step, that fierce silence that felt like a threat. It never truly left. Maybe the creaking stopped, maybe the obsession with fear faded, but all throughout that place there was a cold presence, something undefined, the silence, like a creature that was waiting, and just an occasional glance toward those hidden corners could bring back all those dreadful memories. I'm no longer sure if it was all just in my head, or if it truly existed. One thing is certain, I never completely left that house. I never really left it, and something stayed with me, maybe forever, and it's something I will never forget. Maybe I don't even want to. This is the end of the story. Thank you for listening,